probably the initial assumption that my talk has created is that I'm saying tradition is very good and tradition is very positive and tradition is romantic. That is not what my main thrust was. What I feel is that tradition has been hijacked, और मैं यहाँ tradition and folklore को कभी-कभी interchange करती हूँ, which is slightly different, मगर has been hijacked and is used as a beating stick to legitimize a lot of oppression. I mean, I'm saying it in very straightforward, not a very subtle sentence, but just a straight. Tradition has been used as a soti for us, and anything that you want to stigmatize a woman of, you use the soti of tradition. And whenever she tries to find a discourse or a counter narrative, then you say, now she's an immoral, westernized woman. So the whole tradition, quote unquote, the term and the body of knowledge and the concept has been hijacked away from women and is used as ammunition against her. That's what started us thinking about these developing and doing more research. Because I think that the point is not that tradition is non-patriarchal and tradition is all good. That was never the intention. But the thing is, like Harris's last sentence I liked very much, that tradition has always been discriminatory and oppressive. I think the past, you said, but the current is also very discriminative and oppressive. So what is the difference? And sometimes I feel more discriminative in more subtle ways. Earlier it used to be a bit more straightforward. So I think that is not the point, whether we are saying past is oppressive and present is not, or present is oppressive and past is romantic. I think that as scholars, we do need to do research and we do need to see the gaps, and we cannot build, we can very quickly switch to hijabs and whatever is coming into our culture, because we do not have a base. We do not have a research base. I can't even argue that dupatta is traditional or not. When somebody tells me that a hijab is traditional, I don't have backed up literature or written scholarly articles or creation of knowledge where I can say, no, chadar and dupatta is more traditional than the hijab. So I'm just kind of trying to make a point here that the argument is not about good and bad. The argument is that how come, just like creative arts, people, it's very common these days that जो creativity में engaged औरत वो बेहुदा है, ठीक है? That's just a general या बेगैरत है या बेहुदा है, whatever. But it is always a hit on the morality. It is always an attack on morality, because that is the weakest. That they see what is tradition. If you ask in general, you do a survey, but I'm just assuming, they will say chaste woman, pak baz, nek parveen, all those kinds of things. So singing and dancing doesn't feature in the past traditional role model also, and we need to bring that back, because if we go closer to the ground. So if you move away from metropolitan cultures and closer to the rural areas where there are not that many layers or multicultural phenomena, you will see that creativity is more accepted. Poetry is more accepted. Women have their poetry circles also. So it's as you kind of move towards the modernism or urbanization, it is you should have thought of. So I hope that I'm able to clarify that the main direction of the initiative is not to romanticize the past, it is to reclaim. And it is very closely linked to how we see ourselves, we women, how we look at our bodies, how we look at our sexuality, how we look at our decision making. Because if we start to assume that everything is a natural, a woman needs to cover all the body parts, and that is a very natural thing, because obviously you have to, having a body is vulgar. Those concepts are rooted in our past concepts, perceptions of a woman, function of a woman, place of a woman, and research on that and unpacking that and separating some progressive. I like the comment on the change of culture also, because I think that is at the core of this initiative. And until we start unpacking these things, we cannot really turn towards pruning the culture. So for example, if today we say, okay, some people will say honor killing is tradition, some will say no, it is not, it is abuse of tradition. I do not know which it is, but the thing is, unless we unpack it, unless we do research, we are not able to say whatever it is, we do not want it in our tradition. You know, we need to move forward. It is like, you know, I always give an example of if there is crop in the field, there is crop and then there are those weeds and then there are poisonous weeds, and so one needs to make a distinction. We keep cleaning out our culture or transforming our culture, we keep moving forward, but we do need to do research and fill up those gaps where we can't even tell what was developed when was dupatta introduced, or when was this kind of morality introduced and became. Agar just we talk about phrases, you know, budi bodi lal lagam type phrases, we have to get into the background of it, do the research. And for you, very briefly, I like colors, decorations, you know, I think human beings have aesthetic sense. For some genders, it is kind of imposed that they have to be grey blue or black or something. You know, for some genders it is allowed. For some genders, or at least one gender, you allow jewelry. I do not know why men wear a necktie. I have not done research, but you know, one could make out anything. It's a weird piece of cloth that hangs around their neck. It arrows towards something. I do not know what. So one can do research and figure out what that necktie is all about and why only a necktie has color and the rest of the garment is very dull. So it's just fun. I think we should explore where it came from and how it kind of fitted into our tradition. Where a doula has to wear a necktie and a suit on his walima. Now, how did that happen? So I think that it is our present is very attached and very closely connected to our identity, our past, how these traditions became what they are. Otherwise, we just assume, yes, women have long hair, men have short hair, and men wear blue, grey, brown, and women wear. We have to go in the background of it, how it turned, how it all came about. And if I say women are repositories of culture, of course that is also linked to patriarchy. You know, it suited men to keep women in charge of the repository. But then, in the process, we earned something very good also. We are able to create more poetry and sing songs, etc. So it all needs to be unpacked and researched and figured out, and that is how we move towards our future, and that is how we prune our culture. If we keep culture dead in museums and not talk about it because that has nothing to do with past, I think we will lose out big time.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to thank all the panelists, presenters, and the discussants, and the audience for taking so much interest in this panel discussion. Thank you. And you can
Thank you for this interesting discussion. Without further delay, I would like to call upon our for our closing ceremony. Thank you. So may I have the pleasure of calling upon our esteemed and distinguished guest for this closing ceremony, our keynote speaker, Nilofer from Sri Lanka. Then the chief guest of the closing ceremony, Asma Sahiba. Vice Chancellor of Quaid-i-Azam University, Dr. Ashraf. And Director of Center of Excellence in Gender Studies, Quaid-i-Azam University, Dr. Farzana Bari. Also like to invite Arifa Khalid, our guest, on stage. She is Member of Parliament. So without having further delay, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for this closing ceremony, Professor Niloufar Dhimar. She is a senior professor and head of Department of English at the University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. She is the author of Militarizing Sri Lanka, Popular Culture, Memory and Narrative in the Armed Conflict, Women and the Nation's Narrative, Gender and Nationalism in 20th Century Sri Lanka, and several book chapters and journal articles that bring together multidisciplinary perspectives on society, security and culture, feminism, literature, film, disabilities, and performance art. She was a member of the jury of the Commonwealth Writers' Prize in 2008 and the TSC Prize for South Asian Literature in 2015, and has served on several juries at film and theatre festivals. She holds a PhD degree from the University of Kent and has several distinguished visiting fellowships at the international universities, including Yale, New York University, Rutgers, the 5 College Women's Studies Research Center in the US. So may I call upon Professor Niloufar from Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, sir, for that introduction. Vice Chancellor, Quaid-i-Azam University, Asma Jahangir, Chief Guest, Honorable Member of the National Assembly, and Dr. Farzana Bari. I first want to say how deeply grateful I am to the Center for Excellence in Gender Studies of Quaid-i-Azam University for inviting me to come here. It's been a while since I was last in Pakistan, and it's so good to be back to reconnect with friends that I've known for a long time, but also very especially to watch a younger generation take on the mantle and also meet the younger faculty members of the of Excellence for Gender Studies at Quaid-i-Azam University. It's really been an honor to meet the new people and reconnect with the old. We've had 2 excellent days of discussion. The papers have been deep, provocative, and I'm also very grateful to the organizers for scheduling it in a way that we really had the time to think with and through the authors and their papers and to ask questions. So thank you for that. In a recent publication entitled GEMS, a feminist manifesto for the study of capitalism, its authors, Laura Baer, Karen Ho, Anna Singh, and Sylvia Yanagisako, playfully pun on the word gens. A word from ancient Rome that signifies aristocratic lineage. It was then transformed in the hands of the American anthropologist Lewis Henry Morgan in the 19th century in his study of kinship patterns to signify the original matriarchal genesis of a community. Engels then modifies Morgan's take by noting that the patriarchal form of gens led to the end of the matriarchal system. As the authors of the Feminist Manifesto note, we rarely think of this history, of the etymology root of gens today. This is particularly so even when we talk of gender, which, as we have discussed these past 2 days, is used not only by governments and developmental actors as a synonym for women, but even by many of us. And I'm really thankful to G here for requesting us to complicate how we use this term, gens and gender, from within a trans position. In fact, he's called not to define it at all. And this would be really within the irony of the term's root, because it signifies a history of contradictions between male authority and female kinship ties. This irony is not lost on the authors of the Feminist Manifesto. From this instability, they derive a jouissance, a kind of pleasure to say that, and I quote, gens is a capacious and flexible term that references our interest in the generative powers of capitalism, which is their particular project, and the inequalities it creates. In this sense, they state, we are particularly fond of the generative aspect of the term that is centrally concerned with means and mechanisms, or the very process of regeneration through which systems and socialities are made. For these authors, the gens approach is a strategy to reveal the constructedness and the messiness and the hard work involved in making, translating, converting, and linking diverse capitalist projects that enables capital to appear totalizing and coherent. As against this apparent monolithic hegemony, the Feminist Manifesto sets out to uncover what is unstable and contingent about capitalism in diverse life projects. It thereby signals an important emphasis on looking at the full range of productive power and practices through which people constitute diverse livelihoods. In the South Asian context, this would include the scholarship on women's land ownership, matrilineal inheritance patterns, common ownership of community resources, including natural ones, and resistance to global capital, etc. I begin my address to you citing a play on the term gens by a group of women writing a feminist manifesto, because there has already been much discussion at this conference on the term gender, how it is deployed by donors and governments, and whether it is useful to recover women as a category within this term or not. We have also had discussions on gender and development, and of contestations over the term empowerment, and the lack of a transformative feminist charge, whether in developmental drives, state reform processes, cultural production, or religious movements in Pakistan today. But what exactly do we mean when we say we want feminism back on the agenda? As already flagged through questions from the floor, who is this we? The tensions amongst feminists and women's groups noted here point to the fact that the we constitute diverse range of positions, occupy a diverse range of positions, even as there are those who deploy feminist goals and strategies who disavow the term altogether. Discussions at this conference have taken different routes to explain and theorize these tensions. And it is precisely because these tensions reflect sites and formations of power, either in the case of development, faith, and culture, enjoying the backing of international development agencies and our own states, or because they attract large numbers that form a critical mass, or incite real and often violent passion over issues of authority and authenticity and appropriateness, that they are more powerful, or it appears to us that they are more powerful than groups that are avowedly feminist, leftist, secular, anti-nationalist, and so on. This makes the feminist, as Nivedita Menon writes in her book Seeing Like a Feminist, feel always at the margins, in a, quote, relatively powerless position with reference to every dominant framework that swallows up the space and the center, unquote. This also gestures to an epistemic community that comes together, as Maitri Vikramasinghe points out in her book on meaning-making within feminist research methodology, under a paradigm which she describes as a theoretically derived worldview which provides categories and concepts and becomes a covert reference point that binds us together. It is a place that, to quote Vikramasinghe again, takes up itself the authority to speak for and from a specialized knowledge base. This is what all of us have been doing these last 2 days, although not without contestation. We have been charged on the grounds of elitism, speaking from within the corridors of power in academia, etc. And it is precisely because this conference has given us a safe and shared space to do so, an assembly point for discussing the assemblages of interconnected knowledge, discourse, standpoints, and practice, that such meetings always paradoxically reinforce an affect of the margin, of being in encircled spaces of the kind Nivedita wrote about, that are nevertheless also sites of privilege and authority. This is a tension we often live with. And here at this conference, these tensions have been flagged in the discussions on center periphery, within women's movements themselves, the exclusionary pockets that take place in our own conversations. And it was conversely very interestingly flagged by G, who said that LGBTI discussions would not have radical potential in a space such as this, precisely because this is a margin that is also safe. So therefore we occupy in this room a site which we feel, which has the affect of the margins, but which is also safe, but is also home to institutional privilege, whether of nationality, class, ethnicity, caste, profession, and so on and so forth. It holds in and out groups, we know that. So therefore, as Graham Huggan writes, drawing on post-colonial feminist studies, there is a need to emphasize a feminist cartography which disassociates itself from the over-signifying spaces of patriarchal representation and produces an alternative map, characterized not by the containment or regimentation of space, but by a series of what he calls centrifugal displacements or rhizomatic maps. A rhizomatic map, following Deleuze and Guattari, would acknowledge a series of intermingled lines of connection that shape shifting patterns of de- and re-territorialization. Listening to the paper by Fatma and Saad last afternoon, their motive of the hinge, and working out a theory of the binary and the borders of those binaries from within a particular discourse of Sufism resonates, I think, with this idea of entanglements and lines of connection. And Nazish spoke about it this morning as visitations. To go back to Maitri Vikramasinghe, these connections pose a challenge to our tendency sometimes to call feminist research and knowledge production the only genuinely political one, to call gender activism as underwritten only by the profit of capital, and research on women as being somehow neutral because it is within a compensatory and aspirational model of equality. As Vikramasinghe notes, the inclination towards such separation misleads because there are shared aims and assimilations of feminisms, gender, and women in both local and global research knowledge, production, and practice. My talk today addresses these issues through three examples from Sri Lanka. And perhaps this is